My secret, just do something that ain't nobody ever done before, but make it sound like something that's always been there forever.
Hello, welcome to This Filipino American Life, a podcast that explores the nuanced experiences of Filipinos in the United States at iba pa. My name is Joe Bernardo, and I'm joined by my fellow co-hosts,
Ryan Carpio,
Elaine DeLellis,
and Mike.
Yay, Producer Mike!
Producer Mike.
Pew, pew. Nice radio voice, Joe.
Thank you. Today, we'll before we go into our episode, I want to give some shout-outs. Shout-outs to everybody who came to the TFAL 1-year anniversary party.
Woohoo!
That was awesome. Thank you for Pilar Diaz, who helped sponsor that party. We really, really appreciate it.
Yes.
It was lots of good food, lots of karaokeing, lots of line dancing.
We did it all.
I know.
Didn't we almost have it all?
We almost had it all, actually. We had some. The food was great.
Yeah.
So Park's Finest did it again.
Yes. Shout out to everybody at the Park's Finest for hosting us at the Park's Finest. And another shout out to Sherwin. He sponsored our very first Sherwin M podcast mic.
Oh, nice.
Or is it the A1 pharmacy
Both.
mic? Was it both? Yeah.
Nice.
He bought a mic for us, so we really appreciate that, Sherwin. And another shout out to Nell Klein. She was the first person to buy our new TFAL t-shirts.
Mm-hmm.
So please go on our Facebook page or our website and see our new t-shirts or t-shirt design.
Yay, thank you, Nell.
And
we have a TFAL Patreon campaign.
What's a Patreon campaign?
A Patreon is patreon.com. And if you look up TFAL podcast, just like that, you could help sponsor TFAL by making monthly contributions of $1, $5, $10, $15, or $20, and then you get like cool incentives like special shout outs and all these other things that are all on the Patreon. So for our first 3 Patreons, we want to give you a hello on our podcast. So it's going to be Beverly and Aria, Rianne Fajardo, and Whit L. Hello. And y'all can be TFAL Pan of the episode, but we'll stagger it. So, Bev, you are TFAL Pan of the episode. Thank you for being our first TFAL Patreon.
And we also want to give a shout out to Leland Simpliciano. So if you visit our Patreon page or if you want to contribute to us, do what Leland did. He said, "We love you, TFAL," and gave us a contribution. So we want to say thank you to Leland for being a true fan.
he came to the TFAL party.
Of course
we
he
got
did.
to meet him in person.
Right on.
Shout out to Leland. So yeah, today is kind of a different pattern that we had in TFAL. We don't usually talk about very, very current events. We do talk about current issues that kind of come and affect the Filipino community, but we wanted to cover the whole mail order family that whole debacle, but it kind of came and went real quick, and we're not super fast in publishing the podcast, so
We're trying. We're getting better.
yeah. But yeah, we all wanted to talk about the My Family Slave article that came out on the Atlantic, which was last week.
So I'm holding now a physical copy of the Atlantic that has Alex Tizon's cover story, which says, "Lola was 18 when my grandfather gave her to my mother as a gift. We brought her to America for 56 years. She told in our home, my family's slave."
So basically, it's the story. It's an article by Alex Tizon. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner, and he talks about his life growing up with a katulong in his family, and he found out later in life that she was very. She was abused. She was kind of more or less a slave. He calls her a slave. She came here not on her free will, and yeah, this article became very viral.
Totally.
Very viral, and even non-Filipinos are sharing it.
Well, even my family read it, which they don't really read stuff that I send them, but
Yeah.
my entire family read it, which is great. So
Yeah. And just like as a caveat, if you haven't read the article, we're going to basically talk about it and give our reactions. But so if you haven't read it, please stop the podcast right now, read the article, and then come back and listen to it. Another caveat is this is basically our points of view, our reactions. We're not going to cover everything.
there's a lot to
There's like a lot to cover, a lot of layers.
Lot to unpack.
Yeah, a lot to unpack. We're not all academics. Don't expect discussions.
That's right. I'm not.
Don't expect discussions on like Hegel or Franz Fanon or
Wow,
Foucault. and
what
all
are you
those folks.
saying? What are these things?
This is Mike, Joe, Ryan, and Lane.
And we are. I mean, for me, I think I'm going to use the word katulong. It's, I think, the more PC term that people in the Philippines use is kasambahay to kind of talk about a live-in
Of
maid.
the house?
Yeah, there's a lot of names for it. There's like alila, atsay, chimay, utusan, and kind of the current PC term is kasambahay.
So is kutulong like
I would say that's the most
pejorative?
common.
Or is it,
It's the most common, I think.
common?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
But it's not pejorative, is it?
It literally means
Help.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's still pretty popular. I mean, especially among Filipinos here. Yeah, I guess people use the word katulong. So, so why don't we just get into it? What are your initial thoughts about the article without getting into like other people's opinions and other people's articles that have the subsequent articles that came out?
Yeah.
Like, what was your initial reaction to the article when you first read it?
When I first read it, I couldn't get over how good the writing was. Like, as a fan of writing, I was floored at how everything was put together, and I was just bewildered that like anybody could write that good. And I'm like, oh, I have goals in life. Like, I wish I could meet this person and just talk to them. Like, how did you come to these? How did you get these words to get together? All of these things. And then when I pushed past the like beauty of the prose, I was just angry at the whole concept of the story. And so I actually participated. Like, there's a woman she's putting together like a compilation of reactionary poems to the Alex Tizon article, and I had written something myself, like just cause, like as a for my own personal sanity. I wrote something, and I ended up submitting it to her, and it's gonna be published in like a issue of something. It's called. I'll want to get the info. I will announce it. But like, my reaction when I wrote the piece, my poem, was like the cruelty that the family treated Lola, like the mother and the dad. That's what really resonated with me and like made me so angry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I felt. And I don't think, in my opinion, I didn't think he was like entirely complicit because he was a child and it's like a weird family dynamic. But I did feel anger towards him as well. I did, because I wanted him to do more. But like, it's your parents. Like, what are you going to do? Yeah, that was me.
Right.
I had several reactions to it. The first time I read it was right before going to bed, and I was really, really sad. I was just really, really, really sad about it. But I want to kind of echo what Elaine was saying about the writing. It was just, if you guys read the article, there's just a lot of the writing is brilliant. And I actually thought that it kind of captured. I'll give you an example. Just when he talks about the Philippines and the smells of coming out, I was like, okay, I felt like I was there, So the writing itself, separate from what the content was, the writing was brilliant. But, it was a long read. So right before bed, I was really, really sad, and immediately I sent the article to a few family members and friends, and I said, you got to read this. I read it again just to get some more meat out of what I wanted to understand what was going on even more. I read it again, and mad wasn't really my initial reaction, but later on I was just like, man, this is nuts. You know, is what the reaction I came up with. And then a third time there's like a audio version. My entire family listened to it, and we were discussing it as we were listening to it. So my sister, my dad, my brother, but I got to tell you, my other reaction that struck kind of like controversy with my own family is I wasn't shocked. The story doesn't necessarily like the story of the system didn't shock me. It didn't shock me in the sense like, okay, I can see that happening. What shocked me more was like, man, that's a long time with one family, right? For Lola to do that with to serve one family. But it didn't shock me, and maybe that's something that kind of makes me go, wait, why didn't it shock me? Why is this, why didn't it shock me that something like this could happen, to someone like a Lola or, and then of course the sadness part is just because there's a lot of like missed opportunities to do good, a lot. And, I
on the author's part.
I think a lot of missed opportunities to do good on the author's part. And even just, it's like after reading it, like I was just kind of frustrated. I'm like, oh, you could have done this or you could have done that. And I don't know if that's even true. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what more he could have done when he was younger, or his older brother when he was younger. I think he mentioned that his older brother was the one who kind of like started using that for the first time he ever used the word slave, and it kind of jolted the family, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, anyway, as you can tell, there's a lot of emotion coming from me. There's just so much to really unpack here, but my initial reaction was really sadness, and a little bit of frustration, but not shock.
Mike?
So I saw when the article was published like that night and read a little bit of it in the morning, and I couldn't get through all of it in one sitting. So I kind of I've been jumping back in and out of it. But I think in real time, as I was kind of seeing all the comments come out, I know we're going to talk about it right now, but I think my initial reaction was just this weird kind of sense of guilt, because having witnessed some form of this or another in my visits to the Philippines and getting to understand our extended family, and not really processing what was at play in those dynamics, right? That there are people that were living with family and relatives in the Philippines that weren't really family, that weren't, there ostensibly because, this is where they wanted to live, but that because of a set of circumstances that they happened to be living there and taking care of everybody. And not really questioning that dynamic, because it seemed like it was just considered part of that life for them, especially because my family is from kind of out, I guess you'd call it the bundok, right? And so, and knowing that there's a lot of poverty out there, but there's also a lot of families that, if they by circumstance have family here, that they have a certain amount of wealth. And that the dynamic that plays out amongst that disparity results in these kind of situations, but not having the capacity to kind of question it or kind of understand it the last couple of times I had been there, and it's been over like 12 years since I've been to the Philippines. As I read the article, I was kind of like, it was starting to kind of make certain things click in my head about what I had been seeing, but not quite understanding. And then I just felt like, well, why didn't I process that initially? And, was there a space for me to even say something about it, even if it felt kind of weird at the moment? And still not even knowing how to approach that as a conversation with my family. Like, so, this person and that person, were they getting paid to be there? Right. Are they like distant cousins somehow? Or, is this just an accepted part of the culture? I mean, I don't even know how to approach that conversation. I probably never will, really, because we don't have those kind of conversations in our family. But yeah, just kind of started triggering some memories about the last images that I had of the Philippines, the last 2 or 3 times I'd been there. And, getting to know, because I don't have a lot of real blood family in the States. I mean, some of them are starting to trickle in now. But getting to understand what the idea of family was out there and who was included in that and who was kind of there but not included in that.
Yeah,
So just a lot of place. So, I mean, I'm still kind of thinking through what, how from just the story, like, just thinking about what are the dynamics in our own family in which a situation like this, continues to play out, and whether or not there needs to be conversation about that, or if I'm just not understanding my culture enough or understanding my family enough to see things the way that they just seem to see things.
Yeah, I think that's what's kind of struck a chord in me. It was because it was from a second generation Filipino American's point of view, and it was more or less like I could not relate, but I never had katulongs or anything, but like you can relate into like how that's not the same kind of culture is in the United States as it is in the Philippines.
Like in your mind, you're thinking katulongs are only in the Philippines. Like
Yeah.
in America, you don't have like in my head, I thought yaya right away. So I was like, in America, you don't have that. Like you have your parents and you have your relatives, but you don't have a yaya. You don't have a helper, because how could anybody afford a helper? Because on TV, if you have a maid, you're like really rich.
Yeah, right. So it was for me because you know katulong culture, but you know it in the Philippines, and you're kind of forced to like examine and confront it here with that article, and also of course like Alex Tizon's journalism. I thought it was a good story. It was well written, and it didn't make me necessarily feel compassion or anything for him, or I wasn't like, oh my God, you're such a good, like, you're so good for like bringing the story out. I'm like, it's good. It's a good story. He was a great writer. And actually I had a conversation with my friend about it. It's like watching the difference between watching a documentary about the mafia and watching The Godfather, right? Like you feel like you're more involved and understand it more through like a narrative that really captures your emotions. And so I thought that's why it was a good kind of piece to talk about katulong culture, and then also I also felt I could feel like the internal struggle that he had, like to, I guess, between choosing like his parents over like Lola Eudacio Pulido. That's her real name. And so for me, like I was kind of raised by my grandmother, and you can feel that, and not that she was a katulong or anything, but at times I was like, I love my Lola more than my mom, because she's the one that actually took care of me. So I kind of understood, or not understood, but I could feel that emotion.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, those were like initial thoughts, and since then there's been like tons and tons and tons of articles,
So many
Facebook posts, and
like
Twitter posts.
This article came out on Monday, and I think I have talked about it every day.
Exactly.
And there's been a new reaction piece every day.
Oh, I do want to say that initially I wasn't gonna read the article. I was just gonna listen to audio, but then it was just some like white dude.
No, I was like, dude, they should have just used the Filipino guy to read
We
this.
should record it, and we should.
Lola was 18 years
What if
old.
we did that? We would be a very long recording, because the article is very long.
Yeah.
And I think the actual podcast, or like the audio recording on Atlantic website, is like an hour long.
Yeah. I mean, it's like when you scroll down and you keep scrolling, you're like, am I halfway yet? I'm like, oh no.
I was like, it's Lola as a grandmother, not
Lola
as in
is showgirl. Her name was Lola. She was a showgirl. Not like that.
Not like that. No. And there's been articles that have been written from different political points of view. And so, one of the kind of criticisms was that the article was centered around the son of a slave master, right? And that was a big criticism, that it made us feel compassion for the slave master's son. So my question to you is, should we feel sorry for Tizon as he's writing this?
Should we feel sorry for Tizon?
I mean, do you think
Alex
that was
Tizon,
his
the son.
intent in any way, that he was trying to
I
absolve
don't.
himself?
I don't think he was trying to absolve himself from
I
the
don't
story. I think he was trying to tell Lola's story, but at the end of the day, it's still his story, right? And so there's a lot of things. Also, I don't think Lola wanted her story to be told.
No.
It didn't seem like it.
Or like, yeah.
Because he had to pry the questions out of her, the answers out of her. So I feel like the anger at it being the slave master's son, in my opinion, it's a lot of people imparting their own biases and feelings towards like patriarchy and whatnot. Because I honestly think like this is his love letter to his real maternal parent, like his actual parent. Because when you read the story, like his biological parents are awful, terrible people, and like they're the villains in the story. But like families are complex. It is so easy for us to say like he should have been like, fuck you, mom, like I don't care about you, Lola is my real mom, and then like never talk to his mom ever again,
or free Lola from her captivity.
It's so easy to say he should have done that, but like there's a reality, like family relationships are hard. To actually separate yourself from a family member is extremely difficult. You'd be like never talking to your mom again ever. How could you do that? Some people are like, it's so easy. I'm like, I don't think it's that easy. And I think a lot of Filipinos feel like the reaction that I was getting was like, we all know that story. Like that's the thing. Like Mike is saying, you understand it in relation to being in the Philippines. Like, and there's a lot of like that's the way it is reality. And it's like we have so much of like that's the way it is, but then it's put against the reality as us as Filipino Americans of what we learned as what slavery is. So like slavery to us is something that happened 500 years ago to black people in America, right? Like that's what we think of slavery.
500, that's a long time. No. 100 years.
100. Oh.
150.
No, it was like 1800.
1865. was
Oh, yes,
emancipation.
historian. Sorry.
It may have started 500-600 years ago in the Western
world.
continent.
Yeah.
But
like slavery to us is in our minds always in the past. And so to have it put next to an actual Lola, like somebody that we all can picture our own Lolas taking care of us. It's a harsh reality to face because you don't want to believe that of your own people. You just want to think it's happening over there. It's happening to them. And you're like, nah, dude.
You're right.
Like it happens next door. It happened to this guy.
Yeah.
And it happens in our homes. And we have to like, everyone is reconciling with the fact that our laundry is out for the world to see. And I think that's upsetting a lot of people.
Yeah.
So to me, if you ask, are we supposed to feel bad for the writer, Alex Tizon? I don't think so. When I read the article though, I do think that he comes off as some sort of hero, at least the first time I read it. And I wanted to just read it again to make sure that Lola was kind of like the hero in this because of her kind of like her commitment and resilience, which is a whole nother layer of thing, by the way. You kind of brought it up, the whole idea of family, and there's a lot of things to talk about here. But I don't think Alex wrote it. In my opinion, I think he wrote it to actually share a story about somebody who he wanted to share a story about. I think that's what it really comes down to. Although it did still strike a chord with me, I'm like, oh man, he looks like the savior in here. At some point, he's the guy that kind of like brought it brought it to light. He's the one that took in Lola towards the end of her life after his mom died. So no, I don't feel bad for him. I think that there's a system that was in place there, and there's a family dynamic that he had where, you know, like Elaine was saying, is you can't necessarily just get out of, you know, like there's a whole guilt complex, and there's a reason why you know, his family or his brother was the way his brother was, and why Alex was probably the way he was as well. And coming here, bringing it to the United States, I think that goes into what you were saying, Joe. It's like, you know, we know the katulong culture in the Philippines, but we don't necessarily know it here. That's what I think Alex wanted to bring out. Like, hey, you know what? This happened. It happened to me. And it happened to me, and I was in denial about it for a really long time. And there's no other way around the word slave. Because that actual reaction, you know, when I was talking to my family about it, you know, we were all kind of scratching our heads and like, what other word can we use here? You know, katulong is a culture.
Yeah,
you know, it's kasi it's not really slave. It's parang adoption. Like,
But she wasn't paid.
No, I know.
Yeah, no,
But that's my point.
Yeah,
my point is, like, we were trying to, and I know some reactions are this way as well. We are trying to find a word that kind of apologizes for what happened, where we shouldn't really be apologizing for what happened. And we can't just use the word culture as a crutch.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a cultural thing, and then dismiss. No, right? I think that's why this is such a punch in the face. Is like, even though a lot of folks understand the katulong culture, a lot of Filipinos and maybe some Filipino Americans, they understand the katulong culture. Once you tell them that's slavery, you notice there's a reaction of like, oh shit, really? Right?
Yeah.
Or like defensive. Yeah.
Defensive, and also like, no, iba, it's different. It's different in the Philippines because some people don't have a choice.
You know what? Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, okay, right. So there's, I know that's why there's a lot of layers here, because we're talking about the the economy and the economics of paid service.
And that's the thing. That's the key thing to the story. Like, when I think katulong, I don't think slave, because in my head they're getting paid, right? But in Lola's case, in this Tizon story, she's not. She was a gift. And like the character of his mother is what's really questionable. Like, early on, she's supposed to be palot. She's supposed to be punished. And she makes Lola take the punishment. And that's so early in the story. And I was like, this bitch. Like, what the hell? Like, you're the one who got in trouble, and you thought, I'm going to make my katulong take my punishment? At first I was like, well, why didn't the dad just say like no and palo the mother? But because like they were all complicit in how they treated the Yudacio. But you know what I mean? So like, their character is what's really in question. And I think that's like the visceral reaction that so many people have towards his mother.
So what degree does so the behavior of his real parents, right? I mean, I saw one of the things that you guys were passing around was the kind of that Twitter chain of like reactions, and how the one woman was breaking down how, you know, how do you factor in the fact that he had essentially abusive parents, an abusive family? Does that play into his ability to even react in a human way to what is happening before him? Like, you know, he is also a victim in a certain way of his parents' neglect. And so, you know, as, you know, do survivors of abuse, do we hold them to a different standard, or do we also hold them to the same standard and say, you know, you should have called it out even if you were also, you know, a victim in a certain way, in a different way? You know, how does that all play into kind of how we should measure his own kind of, you know, reaction or lack thereof, or action, you know? Because
it feels like he's spent the rest of his adult life trying to make it up to her. Like,
yeah,
you know?
I think in his own,
In what he thought.
In what he thought,
in his own
yeah.
privileged way.
Right.
I think his privilege
Yeah.
always kind of got in the way
Right.
of what he was on some form of justice,
Right.
right, for her.
Yeah.
And he never really gets there.
No.
Even at the very end, he he cremates
Yeah.
her body
Yeah.
and
And
brought
then
it back to
takes
the
her-
Philippines.
Yeah.
And it's not.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like enough.
And he admitted that like, nobody really does that.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't really
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another, I guess, criticism of the story was that, he wrote it from his point of view, and he didn't get enough of Idosia's point of view.
Yeah.
What do y'all think of that?
I mean, when did she die?
2011?
Okay, and he probably started writing this, a year and a half ago, according to some.
No, he's been.
No,
He's
he
been
has been
trying-
5 or 6 years. They
Yeah,
said.
Oh,
he's
he-
been trying to do the story.
Okay. Okay.
That's at least what I read.
Yeah. So he was doing it right, kind of like before.
Mhm.
I think it was a story he always wanted to tell. He just didn't know. I mean, that's
Yeah.
my opinion.
Mhm.
He just didn't know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because how do you write a story about your family's own abuse?
Right.
No, but like that's about her, her point of view. Like, I guess he was trying to get her point of view the
Right.
whole
With
time.
all the questions that he was asking.
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
But it's like what if you don't want to tell your story? Like so many times
Yeah.
these workers, like you just know to not speak up because you don't want to get in trouble or you don't want to upset anybody. And like, plus being uneducated, she didn't go to school. Like it's such a trap to say this, but like that's pretty typical of domestic workers. Like
That what?
they
Right.
like your lack of education and lack of like community amongst like in relationships with other people causes this vacuum, and then you're reliant on your abuser. So like Lola was reliant on this family for her way of life.
Mhm. And also in a way, like the family was reliant
On her.
On her.
Yeah.
And maybe that gave her some form of I don't want to say purpose in the world, but like
And
she
I know
felt
what you mean.
she felt
Yeah.
she felt good that people were eating her food that
Yeah.
she made. And I don't know. I mean, it's hard to get her story, and she was silent when they asked her, and
Right.
maybe silence is her story enough. It was rebellion. Silence was rebellion in and of itself, and we
That's a
won't
good
really
point.
know.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Alice could have talked to like the relatives more,
Yeah.
but the thing is, relatives didn't know.
they didn't know that she was in this boat to begin with.
Well, I mean, again, going back to the idea of context, right? And if we struggle from the outside or some sense of being on the inside of how do we define all of these things, and if you just straight up ask, especially if it's a family member, it's like, so what do you have to say about this slavery situation?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, no one's going to know how to respond to that.
Right.
They're going to just, they're going to be like, well, what do you mean? Because for whatever their context or understanding of that relationship or that dynamic, it's framed in a completely different way.
Right.
Again, we're
Yeah.
as Filipino Americans, we're looking at it through the lens of our understanding of Western Filipino and American cultures,
Right.
but not really being able to kind of move our, to see it through a different lens. Not to say that any lens is the right lens, but to see it through that different lens it's quite a leap. And so to ask the same of the people who understand it differently, there's a lot of layers to peel back, right? There's a lot, you can't just ask somebody straight up, tell me this story or tell me about your experience, because for them in their frame of mind, you're asking them about experience that they have they don't see the connection to.
Right.
You're like, tell me your experience as, someone who had to serve this family without recompense or, through abuse, but in their
Wait.
mind, it might be like, what do you mean?
What
do you
does-
mean? What abuse?
what does
I was supposed to get
recompense
paid. I was supposed to not get beat. Like, part of that has to do with kind of like the cycle of abuse, but part of that has to do with the fact that if something is normalized to the point at which it's not seen as abnormal, you can't really ask questions about something that and approach it and saying, this is an abnormal thing that I'm calling out, but to you, it's not abnormal. You know what I mean? So there's so much there.
You used a big word. What does recompense mean?
Payment.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Like compensate. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
compensation.
Thank you. You used the word I was like, I don't want to look at.
I also think he could have discussed more of the macro forces at play. I mean,
the context, like the history.
context.
Such a historian, Joe.
No, I agree.
no, because he talks about like Philippine or quote unquote slavery is happening in the Philippines for millennia, right? But
He touches it.
and the thing is, like, he doesn't talk about like capitalism, and sexism, and like the fact that like women are the ones who are always doing this kind of labor. And not to say that he should write a dissertation about it, but maybe he should have put like
he could have gave you a lot more historical context.
Maybe that's the point. Like the point is to give you enough context to say this is the setting of how this happened to. Maybe this is really his attempt to tell as much of the story about this heroine Lola as possible. So because here's my anti kind of like thought process on this, right? If he wasn't a Pulitzer Prize-winning author,
none of us would have read it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
If it was just like statistics and all this stuff. Yeah.
So the fact that he is, kind of going to what Mike was talking about, a little bit opposite of like the standards that we give, he told a story, a beautifully written story, but it's not enough. But, are we glad that the story's out? Are we, is that a positive thing that the story's out there?
I feel like it is because it's caused so much discussion.
Yeah.
And I think within the discussion, like I was in I've been like processing this article in different like groups and different people, and one online community that I was processing it with, like somebody asked, like, does anybody know any nonprofits or organizations that does works for domestic workers? And somebody in there was like, oh yeah, in New York, Damayan. And I was like, oh yeah, in Los Angeles, Filipino Workers Center. They do this work, and they actively organize domestic workers and caregivers, and the article is allowing that conversation to happen, because how am I else going to be like, hey, Mike works at PwC, like, what's PwC, Mike? And you're like, oh, it is. Like, this conversation the article lets you do these things.
Well, I mean, to add to that too, if people are unsatisfied with the loose ends or the incompleteness of the article in any way, it does shine a light on the fact that this is the one time we paid attention to this story being told. And that there needs to be more venues for these stories to be kind of lifted up and kind of, raised for discussion. And you talk about Filipino Workers Center. They're working with KCRW and the Moth to kind of have workers start telling their stories. And I think they're also partnering with Second City and other groups to kind of
teach them improv.
Well, yeah, improv, but also to kind of get workers to feel confident and to kind of see the storytelling space as a place in which things like this can be lifted up in a way that'll lead to hopefully these kind of discussions, or at least, take these things out of the shadows, because, a lot of times, they're within their stories that'll never get told because they're hiding in our own shadows. Right. So,
I read one of the articles where they kind of asked people, oh, why don't you reread it and think of Eudosia or Lola as a third parent, right?
Yeah.
It's like a third parent. So you read that, right? Well, my question then is, if you reread it and imagine that Alex and his family were white,
okay,
right, and they still brought like Lola from the Philippines, and same thing, same stories,
it would be more mad.
Would you have different points of view?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not even gonna think back to just right now when you said it. I was like, damn, that's fucked up.
I would be, because I would be livid, and also this would essentially be the movie Anak with Vilma Santos. But that's what the story is.
Because immediately my reaction is like, how dare you, right?
Yeah.
Whereas it touches upon your thought about, and this is what I was trying to get at earlier, the idea of like family and if it was a completely, we actually don't know if they're related, or do we know that they're not related?
They said who?
Something Eudosia.
I thought it was like a distant
cousin, right?
Oh,
right.
distant.
So I thought about that too, and like the idea of like what family is in the Philippines. But if it was like a white family, I'd be pissed. I'd be more pissed than but I know what you're getting at, and but there is a the fact that they are a Filipino family, the fact that it happened when it happened during a time where you know, I'm not excusing this at all by any means, but the fact that it's distant cousins, you know, there are certain words that were used there that were intentional, in my opinion, from Alex, which is the word gift and the word slave. Because I think those were the words that kind of brought to light this, for lack of a better term, this craziness that we all know about and we haven't talked about, which is that culture, the katulong culture, right?
Yeah.
The gift part was the one that kind of cringeworthy to me.
Totally.
You know, it's like, gift. How do you give a gift as a person?
A person
you know?
as a gift.
As a gift.
Yeah.
Unless they're a slave.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Property.
that's the thing, right? Like that institutionalized thing that happens in the Philippines it happens. Look, there's a reason why I'm not shocked. And it annoys me that I'm not shocked. Actually, I had a discussion with my brother about it. My brother's like, "Nah, man, all our katulongs in the past, you know, we had katulongs.
You've been paid.
They've been paid.
Yeah.
Right? They were paid katulongs." I'm like, I know, but it doesn't surprise me that this happened.
I feel the same way. It didn't surprise me that it happened. When I read the article, I did flash to the movie Anak because, like, essentially, like all these things were happening to Lola, and I could picture Vilma Santos in Hong Kong being locked away in her like care in her boss's home where they withheld her passport and blah blah blah, and like she couldn't get to her family even though like her family was sick, and like I'm like, you know, 15-year-old crying watching this movie. I watched, and when I read it, I was like, this is modern day Anak.
Yeah.
She's not allowed to go back to the Philippines when her parents die. You know, and katulong's like,
Well, modern day. I mean, Anak's modern day. Too.
Anak's modern day too. Yeah. But
It happens all the time.
It happens all the time, and like, it's upsetting. She just didn't get paid.
Yeah.
Okay, but then there's a general kind of sense that people should not give Alex Tizon a pass, but you know, kind of feel for his situation. If Alex Tizon was white, would we give him the quote unquote pass?
I don't think so. I think he would get reamed. I think he would get like totally like pitchforked everything.
But it's the same situation though. Like imagine it's the same situation.
But the power dynamic is different between a white and Filipino like domestic.
There's a whole nother level there of race.
Yeah.
I mean, it's already embedded within this story, like, you know, class differential.
I mean, we saw it in the Tony Bourdain. The Tony Bourdain Parts Unknown or something, when he goes to the Philippines, and then like one of the producers was like, the Lola that they talked to, she's like, she raised me and blah blah blah, and she made me the man I am today. And the whole time everyone's like crying, and in my head I was like, I was crying, but I was crying because I was mad that this woman raised this man, but she didn't get to raise her own children.
Yeah, and the guy was white.
And the guy was white. The producer that Chef Tony Bourdain like read the letter from.
I mean, at least in that situation, she was paid, and like,
she is paid.
It's kind of just more of kind of the OFW kind of situation and other things, but yeah.
But it's so sucky that like this is such normalized thing. Like it is like Ryan, not surprised. Me, not surprised. My anger, not surprising. I actually asked my dad, like, what did you think of the story, Dad? Email me your thoughts. And I called him. He's like, I can't email you because I will write you an essay. It will be thousands and thousands of pages. So I was like, well, tell me what you think. And he was like saying, you know, in my opinion, like 20% of Filipinos are greedy. 20% of are the ones who don't pay them.
I quantified it.
And it was like 20%.
It's like a pie chart.
I was like, that's 20% too much, Dad. But when I brought up like the whole like, what do you think about people like Filipinos are just saying it's just the way it is, and he's like, they're idiots. They're idiots.
So the bringing up just one last point on this, like when you brought up like think about Lola or Eudosia as a family member, right? Like as a third parent or a family member. My dad actually brought that up. He goes, it's almost like they adopted this young woman. Like she was, I think, 18, right?
Yeah.
They adopted her into a family. Not until later do you find out that Lola's biological mom and dad were still alive.
Yeah.
But the fact that this happened, right? So I wanted to bring that up as a I really want to I want to peel that at some point, not necessarily here, but the whole idea of like, hey, you get a family,
Yeah.
right? You get a family out of this, and
You already had one.
yeah, you already had one.
You already had a family.
But just think about that and if we were going to bring in economics here, my goodness.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
what if, I was talking to my sister even said, I imagine Alex's mom was like, in her like if she was going to defend herself to what was going on with Lola, it's like, imagine if we didn't take her in, what would have happened to Eudocia?
Oh my God.
Oh my goodness. Ano mangyayari sa kanya?
Yeah.
Well, that's always like justification.
That is.
Exactly, right?
For this stuff.
Magpasalamat siya. Right?
But it's so insulting.
Right? But
Yeah.
that's the part
Yeah.
that I think, when we want to add context, again, not using culture as a crutch, but those are the kinds of things that
That's
that
what I
we wanna
wish.
get.
I wish he touched upon, because Alex Tizon doesn't talk about the abject poverty that you have to be in
Exactly.
in order to like accept this as your life.
Yeah.
Like you are so freaking poor that your parents are willing to give you away
Exactly.
because they have nothing for you. Like they can't afford your education.
Yeah.
They can't give you a better life. So they think, oh, well, we'll give you a better life because you get to be the katulong for this woman who turns out to be really evil because
Right.
she makes you get palo.
Right.
Like that's terrible.
Yeah.
Like if aside from and just to go into the hypotheticals about being a family member, right? So let's say the mom wasn't such a bitch, but Lola never got paid, but she had an experience of like family where she still did what she did because she thought it was her job, right? But the mom wasn't such a bitch.
Like
And
there was no physical or
there was
no abuse?
like
mental abuse.
I mean, there was.
I feel like that doesn't exist.
You don't feel like that exists.
I don't think that could exist.
But
what do you mean that can't exist?
like oh, we're just gonna take you in.
That exists.
never pay you?
I think.
yeah, that's where I was.
That's what
getting
I'm gonna say. Like and with my family and the people who aren't our relatives but are our family, somehow
yeah.
I don't think they get paid, but I think they get treated nicely. That
They
doesn't
get put
justify
through
the situation.
school.
They get put
Oh,
through.
that's true.
My parents will put them through school. Their kids,
Right.
through
But
school.
that's different. Like,
Is
But how is it
Is it
different?
that's
They
a-
still don't get paid.
It's blurry.
That's what I'm just saying.
blurry.
Like,
It's
so blurry.
yeah.
it's well. Okay, so I said it's different, and my gut reaction is it's different because our families are paying for them to go to school.
Yeah, but does that pay for the lifetime of labor and taking them away from their actual immediate family?
Oh my God,
So
it's so
that's why.
slippery.
That's why. That's a.
So I mean,
Right.
I'm still peeling this apart myself for my family.
Right.
But I mean,
Yeah.
like,
Exactly.
if I really thought about it, the only difference is that, as far as I know, there was no abuse. I don't even know,
Right.
and I'm not going to call my family on that because I don't know enough about the situation. But
Right.
as from the external, it's like, oh, this is just the way it is because,
Yeah.
and they're happy with it on all sides, as far as I can tell. But I don't know.
Yeah,
So-
I asked my dad because he said that like we had katulong because he was saying that my lola he's like the landed class as he defined it.
Landed. Wow.
Landed class, landed peoples were
See,
like
that
middle-
has a history, and
Totally.
that needs to be like talked
totally. But like, because my Lola had land and she took in several women, and they were living in the house, and my dad was like, yeah, your mom there was 2 children who basically were my mom's helpers, and they made her lunch and they ironed her uniform, and I was just like, this sounds really awkward, but okay. But my dad was saying, but your Lola always paid them, so there was a wage. There was like 4 people, 4 women, and Lola gave them room and board, and then whatever the wage was, she divided it amongst 4 girls. So like, it's justified because they got paid, right? They weren't slaves. They were paid.
But were they paid a
I
living
have
wage?
no idea. I
See,
don't
so,
know. I
you know.
have no clue.
I mean, to them, they might be, oh, we gave them room and board. That's
Yeah.
But my Lola still paid them. That's the story that
Yeah.
I've been told, but who knows?
Yeah,
And-
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure if there's a katulong union who advocate. I mean, I know there's
Yeah.
like what they call like kasambahay laws
Mhm.
that I guess sets guidelines on how to treat domestic help, but those like here it doesn't get enforced all the time, and it's
Yeah.
hard to when things are so decentered. But yeah, I think the powerful thing about the article is that it actually put a mirror in front of Filipinos to confront this
Right.
whole katulong culture that is
Yes.
so ingrained in the Philippines.
Ingrained.
And very ingrained, but it shouldn't be taken as natural. You know,
Right.
that like for me, Like yeah, it still needs like it might be different from like antebellum slavery, but it still needs to be challenged, and as like a
Agree.
very immoral. Certain parts are very immoral.
Yeah.
So again, this was just like really fresh. Just my family talking about this, but I was kind of explaining at a young age. So I came from the Philippines. I came here when I was 7, and we had a katulong paid and everything. And our katulong, I knew that she was our katulong. And I guess what I wanted to bring about was at a very young age, I knew the power dynamic of who I was. And
In the relation to
in
the
that
katulong.
relationship with a katulong, I knew that she was hired help. I just knew it. And as a young kid, I knew that she wasn't...
You knew she wasn't family.
I knew she wasn't family.
You knew she was your katulong.
Yeah, I knew that she was there to help us.
But you didn't treat her like a terrible human being because you're not a terrible human being.
I was also 6, but yes, I would like to think that I did not treat her like a terrible human being. I was, 6 or 5 years old. But I guess the what I wanted to say in response to what Joe was saying is like, yeah, we do need to talk about this because imagine that. Luckily that we didn't take that katulong culture into the United States in terms of the economics. You can't afford that, right?
Well, that and like certain classes,
Sure,
Yeah.
of Filipinos migrated here,
right.
Well, that's also another component to this story that makes
Yeah.
it so vile in that they were able to change their citizen status, but then they couldn't do it for Lola.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, you made her super reliant on you because she can't do shit.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah.
also, she didn't have a room. She's like sleeping in the corner in like in front of the like laundry. I was
Yeah.
like, what's wrong with you people? You people are animals. You're treating her like I'm obviously very angry right now. So.
Right.
Yeah. But I also don't want to absolve like Americans as
Yes.
like morally better than Filipinos for like.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
Because like.
I really am glad you brought that up because
Like everyone
Yeah.
go to slaveryfootprint.org.
Okay.
What
Slavery
is
footprint.
that?
You don't have to do it now. I'm saying like, listeners out there, when you're in front of a computer, go to slaveryfootprint.org. You take a survey, and you just kind of answer all these questions about your consumption habits, and you find out how many indentured servants actually work for you throughout the world. It's like estimate.
Whoa.
So I did it the other day, and
How
I
bad
have
was it?
44.
wow.
Oh.
The clothes you buy, like
Oh.
the medicine that we
Yeah.
take, toothpaste,
The shoes we wear.
electronics,
Oh.
this podcast.
Right.
Probably.
Like it was on the backs of indentured labor, and we all have to confront that ourselves.
Right.
yeah.
And so that's why I love the article so much, because it actually it talks about his kind of struggle with this morality. That we're all born into these contradictions,
Right.
And we're all complicit to some sense, to some degree, right? Alex Tizon was born into this, and he was trying to fix it, although
Right.
not always successfully, right? But yeah, we all kind of we're all born into these contradictions ourselves, and we all are complicit, and we need to, what would we do? What am I going to do with those 44 slaves?
Yeah,
that,
shame
like,
on
work
you,
for me?
Joe.
Yeah, Joe.
Shame.
Okay, first of all, you have way more electronics than I do. I'm sure.
Take the survey, Mike.
Take the survey, Mike.
Tell
Take
me
the
what your
survey.
number is.
They were made by well-paid, non-indentured labor.
Oh, well, another thing we're not talking about is that the author, Alex Tizon, passed away in March before he even knew this was going to be the cover story for The Atlantic. So I think that's another element to this story, is that there's no follow-up with any party. Like, you can't do a follow-up with Alex Tizon and ask him, what does this mean? Because he's gone. You can't do a follow-up with Lola either, because she has already been passed away, right? So
What about the siblings? Alex's siblings.
we definitely could, but the siblings
aren't Pulitzer
are
Prize
Pulitzer Prize winners, but also
No, but
he
someone
wrote that story from his own point of view, right?
yeah,
like
yeah.
his siblings didn't ask to be a part of the story. So I can understand, like, when you're writing a personal story, like, you want it centered on yourself so that if there are any questions, you ask me. Like, if I was writing something, I wouldn't want my family, my partner, I wouldn't want Mike to be held accountable for the words that I ever put out into the universe, because he wouldn't even know what my intentions are with them. Only I do. And so only Alex Tizon will know what his intentions are for these stories. We can all make up conjecture and put blame and whatnot, but I think that's the rub here, is that nobody can get that answer because he's gone. And we all have to be okay with that, and I don't think anybody is right now. We're all just like, what does he really mean? What does he say?
It's hard to, it's easy to dissect.
Like, you want to ask, do you think you absolve yourself from this article? You can't. He's gone.
Well, to take it to a whole nother academic level, I mean, in terms of just the art of writing itself and journalistic integrity and responsibility, I mean, as you guys were talking about, like, the things that he didn't do, to what degree is every author required to have a certain amount of understanding of intersectionality, of all the different levels of economic and political kind of layers to,
True.
I mean, like, on the one hand, you don't want to, stifle, or prevent people from writing these things because they don't have the right academic approach. But at the same time, I mean, there is a desire, I think, for us to be all mindful when we kind of start kind of laying out these stories. And at the same time, it's such a personal story that it was his mind clear enough to kind of have that kind of level of dissection of what was happening as he wrote it. And so when it comes down to is, as these stories start, to emerge and hopefully people feel like out of this discussion, more stories can be told, rather than attack the storytellers, use those as points of more conversation around how do we add breadth and depth to the story, even if we can't go back to the original authors and say, explain yourself to us.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack, and we've only like minusculely gone over it.
And it happens today. Katulongs continue to get abused. I know, like, people who work for consulates and consul generals actually get to bring their katulong to whoever they are. Like,
Well,
United
that was
States.
the dad.
Yeah, that's the dad.
That man,
exactly. OFWs continue to serve the first world.
If you have not seen the movie Anak, you should go watch it. It's rather old, but it's worth it, and you'll cry your eyes out.
Yeah, and this continues to happen today because of global capitalism, sexism, feminized migrant people are dependent on feminized migrant labor.
The abject poverty that people live in.
Exactly. I do want to talk about this before we go. There have been kind of efforts to seek justice for the Pulido family, the descendants of the family of Eudosia Pulido. Some Filipino Americans here want to track down the Tizon family and actually demand reparations on behalf of the Pulido family. What do you think about that?
I'm uncomfortable with that because they're the children, and I don't know.
Yeah, but they take the devil's advocate. They did benefit from her labor, right?
They did. But did they have a choice in the benefit of her labor?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard.
Like, would you want to be held accountable for your parents' sins?
Well, don't we ask that for people in power all the time?
This is true. I don't know.
It's hard. I don't know. I don't have an answer.
My gut is to say no, but I think it's so easy to blame their family.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you should hold the mom and dad accountable, but they're dead.
Yeah. That's hard to say.
You should hold the Lolo accountable, the one that gave the initial gift.
Yeah.
It's that dude.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. I don't know what else to say about that. But that's hard to.
What do you think, Ryan? You don't
that's
know?
whole the like how about slavery for African Americans or reparations? That's a whole debate.
Yeah.
Or Native Americans. Well, how do you give reparations to them?
And even like for the internees during World War II, the Japanese Americans, was reparations or whatever they called it back then, was that even enough, or was that even, the right move for justice for them?
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of them felt so. And I mean, I don't know if there's even a legal standing.
I don't know either.
Yeah,
I'm not a lawyer.
I don't know.
Rianne Fajardo, please let us know.
I mean, there is a GoFundMe page that's out. We posted it on the TFAL Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
So if folks want to contribute to that, by all means, you can do so.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard. Everything, it's just all so hard.
Very, very complicated situation.
Yeah. Don't be greedy. Don't be an asshole.
So that's pretty much it, unless you all have other pressing questions or stuff you want to.
I mean, if folks want to share their thoughts,
Exactly, yeah.
You can leave us a voicemail message, 805-394-TFAL. Like, go for it.
Yeah.
Rant and rave to us, and we'll see if we can post it.
Yeah. We definitely just scratched the surface.
Totally.
On this. There's way more like angles
so many
and like
thoughts.
layers to this story that we didn't even talk to. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. And ultimately, the good part of the article was that it got people to talk about katulong culture and
Right.
Yes.
our complicity in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
Agreed.
Agreed.
All right. Well, thank you very much for listening. And yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Leave us messages. Do stuff.
Sorry, I thought you were gonna like talk about like subscribe on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good job. I forgot. I don't have my
I don't do
close
it.
screen.
Yeah, I don't do that well.
I asked if you had your scripts in front of you. before we
Sorry.
started recording.
Subscribe and rate us on iTunes. It helps people find us. We currently have 19 reviews, everybody. So give us more, and people can find us if we get rated. Donate to the Patreon if you want more TFAL episodes.
Follow us on Facebook.
Follow us on Facebook.
On Twitter.
Oh, good job,
This
Mike.
Filipino American Life.
Good job, Mike.
Our website is thisfilipinoamericanlife.com.
Yes, our Twitter is TFAL.
We're also on Mixcloud
Podcast.
and yeah.
Yeah, we're all on all the social medias. We don't have an Instagram, but you can follow us individually for random posts about what we do. Hashtag TFL podcast is
Yeah,
where you'll
living
see
out our Filipino American lives.
it. We're living out loud. And yeah, I guess that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. This Filipino American Life is produced by Michael Nailat. Our intro and outro music is by Roger Habon, aka 10.4 Raj. Resident reality checker Girly Colado, legal advisor Rianne Fajardo, and graphic design by Vincent Collyer.